I mean, seriously, Donald Trump back in the White House. Can you believe it after losing in 2020?
It's wild, right?
It definitely feels like we,
Unique situation, yeah.
yeah, stepped into some kind of political time warp.
Absolutely.
Still trying to wrap my head around it all, to be honest.
It's only the second time in U.S. history we've seen this, a president serving 2 terms, but not back to back.
Exactly.
And you're right, with America as divided as it is right now, this election, man, this could mean some really major changes for all of us.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on our content.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit.
Yeah.
I got to ask you, this golden age that Trump keeps talking about, I mean, it sounds amazing, right?
Yeah,
Who wouldn't want that?
right.
But how realistic is it? I mean, looking back at his first term, was it really all it was cracked up to be? Were there downsides too?
Well, there were definitely some economic wins, but there's no denying. It also came with, well, a widening gap between the wealthy and everyone else. So yeah, there's definitely a chance we'll see some short-term economic benefits, but I think we also need to be really cautious about those potential long-term costs. Things like, like we were talking about, economic inequality.
Okay, makes sense. Potential for an economic upswing, but maybe with some hidden costs.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about something I know is a big concern for a lot of our listeners. Immigration.
Right.
What's the outlook there?
Well, Trump has made it pretty clear where he stands on this. We're almost certainly going to see stricter border control, possibly making it even tougher to immigrate legally. And, there's even a chance we could see an increase in deportations. This is a really complex issue, and it raises a lot of tough questions about, who ultimately gets to call America home.
For sure. Okay, shifting gears a bit here. Let's talk America first and what it means for, well, the rest of the world. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure I understand all the implications there.
Yeah. Well, America First, it basically means a move away from those kind of, traditional alliances, more of a focus on individual deals, a more transactional approach to global affairs. Think of it this way. A world where the U.S. is less concerned with global cooperation and more focused on looking out for itself, even if it ruffles some feathers with our longtime allies.
Okay, starting to get a clearer picture now, and it sounds like we could be in for some rough waters on the international scene. Now let's talk about something else that's been making headlines. Project 2025. I keep hearing this term, but what exactly is it and why should we care?
Yeah, well, think of Project 2025 as kind of a conservative master plan, if you will, to completely reshape the federal government. It's got some pretty bold ideas like, restructuring agencies, maybe even shrinking some departments.
Oh, well, hold on. Shrinking departments. Like, how much are we talking here?
I mean, some folks are even talking about completely eliminating certain departments. It could mean massive changes in everything from environmental regulations to education, healthcare, the whole 9 yards. And then there's this big push to align the government workforce more closely with conservative ideology.
Okay, now this is where I start to get a little nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a lot of folks listening who work for the government, and I can only imagine what they're feeling right now.
Sure.
What kind of impact could this have on their jobs, their careers?
Yeah, it's a valid concern for sure. Project 2025, it proposes making it easier to both hire and fire federal employees. And that creates a lot of uncertainty, especially for folks who have spent their careers in public service. Job security, career paths, their day-to-day work, it's all kind of up in the air.
Right.
A lot of unknowns.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on our content.
So we've got this massive potential reshaping of the federal government looming, and, well, let's be honest, the political climate right now is about as tense as it gets.
Yeah.
It's impossible to ignore. It feels like everywhere you turn, everyone's on edge.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to deny the partisan divide is deeper than ever. It feels like Democrats and Republicans are practically living in different realities.
It's true.
Especially when you look at issues like immigration, race relations, even just the basic role of government in our lives.
Yeah.
It almost feels like we've lost the ability to even have a civil conversation about these things.
And it's not just about political parties anymore, is it? I mean, there's this whole culture war happening that just keeps getting, well, more intense every single day.
Right, you're right. It's a huge factor. The culture war is definitely a big part of why we're seeing so much division. We're dealing with some really complex, really personal issues. Gender identity, LGBTQ+ rights, criminal justice reform, reproductive rights.
Yeah.
I mean, these are topics that people feel deeply about, and it's easy to see how things can get heated when folks feel like their values are under attack.
It's like we're all walking on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling that way.
But here's where things get really interesting for me. How are these deep divisions going to actually play out when it comes to policy decisions? We know Trump has his agenda, but can he really push it through in this kind of polarized environment?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question. And that's precisely what we're going to delve into in part 2 of our deep dive.
Oh, I can't wait.
We'll be digging into the specific policy shifts we can expect to see, the potential flashpoints where conflict is likely to erupt, and what all of this means for the everyday lives of Americans. Stay tuned, folks, because it's about to get really real.
All right, so we've talked about Trump's back, Project 2025 is on the horizon, and America feels more divided than ever. Where do we even go from here? I mean, it feels like we're teetering on the edge of something big, but I can't quite figure out if it's a leap forward or a step back.
You know, that feeling of uncertainty, it's something a lot of folks are grappling with right now. And I think you're right, it goes deeper than just whatever specific policies Trump might try to enact. It's about the bigger trends, the underlying forces that have brought us to this point.
So let's talk about those forces. What's the bigger picture? What's driving all this change and uncertainty?
Well, you can't ignore the rise of populism. I mean, it's not just happening here in the U.S., it's global. There's this growing distrust of institutions, this feeling that the system isn't working for everyday people.
Yeah.
And all that frustration, well, it's bubbling over. It's pushing people towards leaders who promise to shake things up, to disrupt the status quo.
And it's interesting, right? Because that frustration, it's kind of manifesting in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, you have this surge in conservative populism. Trump is a prime example.
Right.
But then on the other hand, you've got a growing progressive movement pushing for radical change from the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And, you know, it's not as simple as just left versus right anymore. You see divisions within these movements, too. New coalitions are forming, new alliances, and the political landscape is becoming, well, increasingly fragmented.
Which I guess just makes it even harder to figure out what's going to happen next.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces are constantly changing shape.
Right. And then you add in technology, which is changing everything so fast. I mean, how we communicate, how our economy works, social media especially. It's this incredibly powerful force shaping public discourse, even impacting elections. But it also feels like a double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah.
It spreads misinformation, it fuels division, and sometimes it feels like it's doing more harm than good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, social media has been a game changer, but it's also created some real challenges. It's almost like we're drowning in information, constantly bombarded with news and opinions from every direction. It's tough to know what to believe, who to trust.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why critical thinking is so important now, more than ever. We need to be able to filter through all that information, to question what we see and hear, to seek out different perspectives.
Absolutely. We can't just passively absorb everything that comes our way. We have to engage critically with the information and be willing to challenge our own biases. That's crucial.
Totally.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on our content.
Easier said than done, though, right? I mean,
Wow.
we all tend to gravitate towards people who already agree with us. We get stuck in these echo chambers where our own beliefs just get reinforced.
That's the real challenge. But if we want to move forward, we have to break out of those echo chambers, engage with people who see things differently, even when it's uncomfortable. It's the only way we're going to bridge those divides and find any common ground.
Okay, so let's bring this back to our listeners. We've talked about this complicated web of political trends, technological changes, everything's kind of swirling around. But what does it all mean for their everyday lives? How is it going to affect them personally?
Well, on a practical level, I think we're going to see changes in a lot of areas that directly impact people's lives. Things like, immigration, healthcare, education, environmental policy. All of these changes, they're going to have real consequences for individuals and families across the country.
And beyond the policy specifics, there's also that broader impact, right? I mean, the divisions, the polarization, it's creating this climate of, well, I don't know, fear and uncertainty.
Absolutely. And that fear, it can be paralyzing, It prevents us from having those constructive conversations, from working together to actually solve the challenges we're facing.
So what's the antidote? What can we do as individuals? I mean, how do we navigate this reality? It feels pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Well, I think the first thing is to stay informed. But it's more than just passively reading the headlines. It's about seeking out information from diverse sources, challenging your own assumptions, being open to changing your mind.
So it's more about being curious, right? Not just accepting what we're told, but actually digging deeper, asking questions, trying to understand all the nuances.
Exactly. It's about asking why. It's about not being afraid to say, I don't understand. It's about being willing to say, maybe I was wrong. And it's also about finding ways to connect with people who are different from us,
Yeah.
to have those difficult conversations, to really listen with empathy, to try and see the world through
Right.
their eyes.
Because ultimately, whether we like it or not, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Our fates are intertwined.
That's a really powerful point. And it should motivate us, it should inspire us to work together to build a more just, more equitable society, even in the midst of all the challenges and divisions.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the potential impacts, the importance of staying informed and engaged. But there's another layer to this, isn't there? Something about the emotional toll, the psychological impact of living in a world that feels so polarized and uncertain.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That's a crucial point. It's easy to get swept up in the headlines, the political battles, the constant flow of news. But we have to remember, this is our life we're talking about. And all that stress, the anxiety, the fear, it takes a toll. It can really wear us down.
Yeah, especially for people who feel like they're being targeted or threatened because of the political climate. We can't underestimate the impact that has on their well-being.
No, you're right. We can't. And that's why taking care of yourself becomes so essential. Finding ways to manage that stress, to build resilience, to nurture your mental and emotional health. If we're not taking care of ourselves, how can we possibly do the work of building a better future?
So it's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
right? Staying informed and engaged, but also setting boundaries, protecting our own well-being.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you can't control everything that's happening around you, but you can control how you respond to it.
Right.
And that starts with taking care of yourself, both physically and emotionally.
Okay, so we've talked about the political landscape, the policy changes, the challenges we're facing, the need to stay informed and engaged and to take care of ourselves. But there's another piece of this puzzle, isn't there? The role of leadership.
Absolutely. Leadership is always critical, but especially in times of crisis and uncertainty. And in our current situation, I don't think it's just about those in positions of formal authority,
Oh.
It's about leadership at every level, in our communities, our workplaces, our families.
So what does good leadership look like in this kind of environment? What qualities do we need right now?
Well, I think empathy is crucial.
Yeah.
Leaders have to be able to understand and respond to the needs and concerns of the people they're serving. They need to be able to build bridges, to bring people together, to inspire hope.
It's not just about words, though, right? It's about actions.
Oh, absolutely. Leaders have to walk the walk. They have to be role models for the values they talk about. They have to be willing to listen, to learn, and to adapt. And they have to have the courage to stand up for what they believe in, even when it's hard.
So we need leaders who are empathetic, courageous, authentic, leaders who can unite instead of divide.
Exactly. And the great thing is that kind of leadership can come from anywhere. It can be found in our communities, our workplaces, even within our families. It's about stepping up, taking responsibility, and working together to build a better future.
It's a tall order,
It is.
but it's also really inspiring. It reminds us that we're not powerless, that we all have a role to play in shaping the kind of world we want to live in.
That's a really important message, and one we need to hold on to, especially during times like these, times of uncertainty and division, because the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it.
Together. We've talked about the challenges, the uncertainties, the need for leadership, the power of individual action. What's the takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to remember from this conversation?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. Even when things feel really difficult, even when the challenges seem overwhelming, there's always hope. There's always the possibility for positive change. And it starts with each of us.
Yeah.
By staying informed and engaged, by being resilient, by cultivating empathy and compassion, by embracing our own potential to lead, we can create a future that is more just, more equitable, and more sustainable.
That's a beautiful message. And it leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive, where we're going to talk about some concrete actions you can take to make a difference in your communities. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Ready to wrap up our deep dive into, well, everything that's happened and everything that might happen. We've definitely covered some heavy topics, but I always say, knowledge is power. And I think we've gained some pretty powerful insights today.
I agree with you. Understanding the situation, all the complexities, it's the first step to navigating it, in a way that makes sense. And yeah, you're right, knowledge is power. But if you don't do anything with it, well, it's kind of like having a car with no engine.
I like that.
So let's talk about what you can do with all this. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, but honestly, even small actions can make a difference. It's about those ripples.
Okay, love the analogy, but let's get practical. What can our listeners actually do? Like, starting right now, what are some tangible steps?
The most powerful place to start. Honestly, it's right where you are, your community. Go to those town hall meetings, volunteer for an organization that's doing work you care about, connect with your neighbors. It's those local actions that often have the most direct impact.
It's about starting small, building from there.
That makes sense.
What else?
Talking. Don't underestimate the power of just having conversations. Talk to people, even actually, especially those who disagree with you. Really listen. Try to understand their point of view. Share your own thoughts, but do it thoughtfully. Building bridges, not walls, right? You'd be surprised what you can learn, where you might find common ground.
Right. Dialogue. It's key.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on our content.
Even when it's hard. Which makes me think of another action. Supporting organizations that are already doing good work.
Exactly. Whether it's donating, volunteering, or just spreading awareness, helping those organizations that are tackling the issues you care about most, that's huge. Find your niche, focus your energy.
Can't forget about voting, of course.
Of course. Make sure you're registered, stay informed about the candidates, the issues, and make your voice heard. Every election matters, from local all the way up to national.
Okay, so we've got local action, engaging in those tough conversations, supporting organizations, and voting. Anything else before we wrap up?
One more thing, and it's crucial. Take care of yourself. Stay informed, yes, but be mindful of what you're consuming, information-wise. It's so easy to get sucked into the negative stuff, that constant stream of news. Limit your exposure to things that drain you. Make your well-being a priority.
It's true. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. You have to recognize you can't control everything, but you can control your response. And that starts with taking care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. The whole package.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive. Trump's win, Project 2025, the divisions in our country.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in. But what really sticks with me is this idea that we're not powerless, that
Yeah.
we can make a difference.
I love that because it's true. And, no matter where you stand politically, these next 4 years are going to be a time of serious change. But change doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be an opportunity, a chance to rethink things, to rebuild, to create something better.
That's a good way to look at it. And with all the division, with Project 2025 and all its goals, well, the question becomes, will we see those goals achieved? Will the next 4 years be defined by, I don't know, gridlock, resistance,
Yeah.
even more polarization? And what role will you play in all of this?
It's a question we all need to think about. The future's not set in stone. We get to shape it collectively.
I love that thought. On that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive for today. This has been incredible. I've learned so much. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. And everyone listening, thanks for being here. Keep asking questions, keep learning, keep engaging, and most importantly, never underestimate the power of your own voice. Until next time, keep diving deep.